So in this video, I'm going to be on page 3 with you guys reviewing about how to multiply and divide your inequalities. And we will also move on over to page 4. But first, what I want to do is review why we actually flip the direction of the inequality symbol if we have a negative coefficient. As you can see here in your packet, solving your inequalities is very similar to solving all the equations that we just finished up. The only thing that we need to be on the lookout for is if the coefficient's negative, we need to change the direction of the inequality symbol. All right, now the first example here, that coefficient's not negative, so when I divide both sides by that number, I'm going to leave the inequality symbol's direction alone, and that's going to stay just like that for our final answer, okay? Now, what we're talking about, though, is if the coefficient was negative. So if I was to divide both sides by a -2, we'd be flipping the symbol. Now let me go through here and just kind of explain why, all right? So as we start out here, we totally agree that 15 is bigger than 12. Now I have a couple of different things I'm going to walk you guys through here, and the first one's going to be multiplication, okay? So let's say I multiply both sides by a negative. So let's say I multiplied this by a -1, and let's say I multiply this by a -1, all right? This side now becomes -12, and this side now becomes -15. So what's going to happen here is that this is obviously closer to 0, so the direction of the symbol switches. So when you influence both sides by the same negative number, the direction switches, okay? That's what we mean. Now, if we divide both sides by a negative, so let's say, this time let's pick 3. Let's divide this side by -3. And let's divide this side by -3. Okay, so I divided them both by the same number that was negative, and watch what happens. This side is now a -4. This side is a -5, and so you can see here that we need this symbol to switch around because -4 is now bigger than the -5. All right. Now, I do want to be clear here. If it wasn't a negative, then obviously we would not need to switch the direction here because the 5 is still bigger than the 4. So it only switches if the number is negative on both sides that you're multiplying or dividing by, okay? So take a look at the next example here. What we've got is that you're dividing both sides by -3. And since right here you're dividing both sides by a negative, notice in my final answer, I'm just flipping the symbol around. So R is on this side, and then we have a -36 on this side. So what we want to do here is we want to now review interval notation. For this one, if R is less than this -36, if I rewrite it with the R first, the alligator symbol would be eating the -36. So on a number line, we'd be shading this way, and we'd have a closed circle at -36. So that'll help with interval notation. We have a -36 here, and we would shade back to the left towards -infinity. Now you can never equal infinity, and since it would be an or equal to for 36, the negative, we're going to get a bracket there, okay? Back up to this one, n is greater than -4, so on a number line, we'd have -4 right here. We'd have an open circle, and we'd shade this way back up towards 0. So that means we're going to have our -4 right here. We shaded up towards positive infinity. You can never equal infinity, and since this one was not an or equal to, I have parentheses there. All right. Now the other thing I wanted to review here as well was the check step. So let's say you're checking your answer to this first problem, and you got that n should be bigger than -4. So the first number I can think of that's bigger than -4 is -3. So let's check. We're going to get a -6 here, and is -6 bigger than -8? It sure is. All right, now let's check this next one. So we're saying here that R should be less than -36. So let's try -40 just so we don't have to worry too much about mental math. -40 is smaller than -36. That'd be this way on the number line. So here we'd get a positive 120. And 120 is definitely bigger than the 12. So we know we're shading in the right direction by going less than, because -40 is a solution that worked, okay? All right, so for this next third example here, because we have just a regular 2, I'm not going to be flipping the symbol. So A is greater than 2. So on your number line, you would start with 2, and you'd shade up towards positive infinity. You can never equal infinity, and here it would not equal the 2, so the 2 gets a parentheses. And let's check. First number I can think of bigger than 2 is 3. And right here, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 is in fact bigger than 4. All right, now this next problem here, I wanted to review this negative, so I'm going to give this next problem its own slide actually. So this is the problem that you guys see on your worksheet on page 3, and it's the same as this problem over here. So right here, to solve this inequality, what you'd be doing, this is your coefficient that's negative. And I wanted to point out here that if it's the coefficient is negative, those are the types of problems when you're going to be flipping the direction, okay? So in this situation, what you would do to solve is you'd multiply this side by the negative 6 over 1, and then you'd multiply this side by the negative 6 over 1. And right there, we just multiplied both sides by a negative. So that's going to be a situation where we have to flip our symbol, okay? Now on this side, this cancels out and we have y. This 6 and 6 cancels out, 1 and 1, negative negative is positive. And over here, this 3 times negative 6 would be a negative 18, okay? So the negative coefficient right here, if the numerator is a 1, 1 times y is just y. So a lot of times the negative coefficient will just end up looking like a denominator. So in this situation, we have this negative, y'all, and I'm going to make the recommendation that we put the negative down here. So the problem that you guys see on your page 3 with that negative out front, we're going to treat the negative down here. And when we multiply both sides by this negative, friendly reminder again, the negative is what flips the symbol. So here's the negative 18 we should get. And this cancels out. Here's our y. And we need to flip our symbol here so y is greater than or equal to the negative 18. So if you see a negative fraction or a negative denominator, you'll definitely be flipping the direction of your symbol. And again, when you multiply on both sides, it switches the direction. That was what we had said on this part of the video here. If I multiply both of these sides, let's say I multiply them both by a negative 2. So if this side is times negative 2, this is negative 24. If this side is multiplied by negative 2, this becomes a negative 30. Now compare your numbers in green, and once again, you can see that the symbol switches, okay? So here we get y is greater than the negative 18, and for interval notation, since it's bigger than, we'd have negative 18. We'd shade up towards positive infinity. You can never equal infinity, and this time, because of the or equal, this side will get a bracket. Now when we check, y'all, let's check something that's divisible by 6, okay? So something that's bigger than negative 18 that is divisible by 6. So let's do negative 12, okay? Let's try negative 12. So this part is going to be a negative 2, but then the negative out in front turns this into a positive 2. And that 2 is, in fact, less than or equal to our 3. We're good to go. All right, and now for this last one, if you just see a denominator of a positive 2, when you multiply it on both sides here, you will not need to flip the symbol in this situation. So m is greater than or equal to 6. So you got 6, you're shading up towards positive infinity, parentheses, and because of the or equal to, this will get a bracket. Last thing we want to do here is check. So let's pick a number bigger than 6 that's divisible by 2. Let's do 8. All right, so 8 divisible by 2, we get 4. And 4 is greater than or equal to the 3, so we know we're good to go. All right? Now let's flip over to page 4 here. And with page 4, you're just going to be solving your two-step inequalities the exact same way. It's, again, very similar to solving your equations. But once again, if the coefficient is negative, you're going to change the direction of the inequality sign, okay? So it's kind of the same idea, but now we're just looking at some two-step inequalities. So let me just walk you through the work for this first one here. You've got 5x minus 8 is greater than 27, so you're going to add 8 on both sides to cancel out the constant. Then we get 5x is greater than 35. Now when you divide both sides by 5, the coefficient cancels out, and it was not a negative, so we do not flip the symbol. In interval notation, we'd have a 7 shading up towards positive infinity, and since it's not or equal to, that would be a parentheses. So what's a value here that would make it true? So 8. 8 would work. And let's check over here on the number line. We have our open circle, and if we were to shade over to the right, positive infinity, you can see 8 would be a number that works, okay? All right, now for number 2 here, our constant is on this side. We have a positive 10, so we're going to subtract 10 over here and subtract 10, and we get a negative 26. Now we haven't switched anything yet. We don't need to because we're just getting ready to divide by a 2. So we're going to have a is less than this negative 13. So in interval notation, you've got your negative 13. And since a is less than, we're going to be shading back towards negative infinity. You can never equal infinity, and it's not an or equal to problem, so that gets parentheses. You'd have an open circle, and we'd be shading less than, and negative 15, we can see here, would be a value that would work. All right, and now last but not least here on page 4, we've got a negative 1/2 y, so we have a negative coefficient. We'll be flipping our symbol. And when we take away 3, it's supposed to be less than the negative 15. So we'll start here by adding 3 to both sides. That cancels out. And negative 15 plus 3 is the negative 12. Now we're just going to bring down the negative 1/2 y. And right here, we're multiplying both sides by the negative, that reciprocal, which happens to be negative, which is why for our answer here, I'm going to switch the direction of the symbol, and y is going to be everything bigger than 24. So open circle on your 24, and we're shading up towards positive infinity. So you've got your 24, positive infinity. You can never equal infinity, and once again, parentheses, because this was not an or equal to problem. There's your interval notation. And now let's go select all of the ones that would work here out of this option for y is bigger than 24. So over here, even though it's a select all that apply, I think we only have one possibility here. Okay? So 41 would be the only one that works there. And that concludes the video on pages 3 and 4. Now you're going to be working on pages 5, 6, and 7 as an independent practice, and there is going to be a Google form. Okay, so now you're working on pages 5, 6, and 7, and there will be a Google form. Thank you.